Let me ask you, you had a bipartisan briefing with President Biden. Hakeem Jeffries were there, other leaders were there. You got a phone call from President Biden. Tell us about it. How'd it go?
Well, I actually had a visit with the president at the White House today for about 15 minutes or 15 or 20 minutes. The other parties were running late, so it was he and I sitting there together. It was a meet and greet. I'd only met him once before. It was cordial and pleasant. I have no problem with President Biden as an individual, right? You respect the office. It's a biblical admonition that you give honor where honor is due, and that's the respect that we have for the office. But he and I disagree on almost no policy. So we didn't get into that too much today, Sean, but there'll be time for that in the days ahead.
Is there any one thing you can think of, policy, that you would say he's done a really good job on this or that?
I can't. I think it's been a failed presidency, and all the problems, some of those that you've articulated already at the outset of the program here, were caused by policy choices. And that's the problem I have with him. It's philosophical. We have such big priorities in this moment right now, Sean. We have Israel being attacked. We have unrest. We have the Ukraine situation we've got to deal with. We have China being aggressive. We have Iran with all the meddling, and China, Russia, and Iran working together. This is a dangerous time. The economy is in the tank. The border's overrun. People are dying from fentanyl poisoning. All of these issues. These are the frontline matters that have our attention right now, and the rest of these things, they're just using for political attacks.
Let me ask, I have a lot of questions. As you point out, there is a lot going on in the world right now. Let me throw some numbers at you, because I think they're very important. We've got war in Europe, we've got Ukraine, and we got Russia. And it seems very precarious there. Already, Joe Biden has given $76.8 billion to Ukraine. He wants $61 billion more. He wants $14 billion to go to Israel. And I think and then he wants to put money on the border, probably to satisfy conservatives in the House and get their support on Ukraine, for example, which seems to be his top priority. A big disparity in the amount of money. I have some criticisms about the issue of Ukraine. Number one, if you're going to fight a war, you should fight it to win it. I thought the president made a horrible mistake by denying MiGs that were offered by Poland. I think the president made a horrible mistake trying to put handcuffs on the Ukrainian army, led by Zelensky, on the issue of how they will fight and what weapons they can and cannot use, like cluster bombs. I don't like the fact that Europe doesn't pay their fair share. So they've got $78 billion. He wants another $61 billion. How will you deal with the issues that he wants to tie all of these issues together, which now gets into the budgetary process? Will you go issue by issue?
I told the staff at the White House today that our consensus among House Republicans is that we need to bifurcate those issues. I agree with your assessment in Ukraine, and that's why the American people are demanding some real accountability for the use of those dollars. Now, we can't allow Vladimir Putin to prevail in Ukraine, because I don't believe it would stop there, and it would probably encourage and empower China to perhaps make a move on Taiwan. We have these concerns. We're not going to abandon them, but we have a responsibility, a stewardship responsibility over the precious treasure of the American people. And we have to make sure that the White House is providing the people with some accountability for the dollars. And we want to know what the objective there is. What is the end game in Ukraine? The White House has not provided that. I was at the White House for a couple of hours today, and I told the staff there that this is where we are. This is where the House Republicans are. So we're going to look at Israel separately.
With that kind of money, is it America having a proxy war with Putin and Russia?
It's a great concern. We've got a group of our colleagues here in the House, led by Mike Garcia out of California, a brilliant legislator and a Top Gun pilot. And some of our veterans have gotten together. Dan Crenshaw is involved in this, and others. They came up with a document that presents 12 critical questions for the White House to answer as a condition of our supplying the additional support. These are not hard questions, Sean. These are things the White House should be forthcoming about. I delivered that myself.
Oh, you did deliver it to the president?
I delivered it myself today, and to the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan.
Did you read it?
He says he's studied.
He's going to study it tonight during the show.
Yes. So we want to be cooperative. We need to work together on this, but we owe it to the people to know what the plan is, where the money's going to be spent, and we need some auditing for the dollars that we've already sent over there. These are not tough questions, right? Mm-hmm. Israel is a separate matter. We're going to bring forward a standalone Israel funding measure over $14 billion.
Is $14 billion enough?
Well, Israel's requested a little less than that, actually. The White House did, by way of Israel, and $14.5 billion specifically is what we're looking at. It's a very specific number tied to very specific measures. But here's the important thing that distinguishes House Republicans from the other team. We're going to find pay-fors in the budget. We're not just printing money to send it overseas. We're going to find the cuts elsewhere to do that.
Let me ask you this. In Israel, it's very complicated. I mean, Syria is now firing missiles into Israel. The Houthi rebels, which I don't know why Joe Biden, they were once designated a terrorist group. He's taken away that designation. Why, I don't know. They tried to fire missiles into Israel. In the north, you have Hezbollah and you have Lebanon. In the south, where Gaza killed 1,400, including 30 Americans, and Americans are being held hostage. Beyond the money part, is there any involvement you see or any reason for any military involvement by the United States? Would Congress support that? Because it seems like with the maneuverings of our Navy and other indications, special forces, maybe to rescue American hostages, any movement that you would support that you can think of now?
It's a very delicate situation. It changes by the hour. We're watching it very closely. One thing that House Republicans are resolved on is that we must stand with our most important ally in the Middle East, and that's Israel. We will. We certainly hope that it doesn't come to boots on the ground. If it comes to that, and we communicated this to the White House staff as well today, that we have the Article 1 power in the legislative branch of government, and they have Article 2. They have very limited authority on what they can do to respond without coming to Congress to seek consent. And even my Democrat colleagues, Sean, that are at committees of jurisdiction understand this, in the Foreign Affairs Committee. There's a purpose for that. The reason the framers put that into the Constitution is that they wanted a multitude of wise counsel to decide upon military intervention matters, on a declaration of war. They wanted the duly elected representatives of the people to make that decision collectively, and not one commander-in-chief sitting in an office.
Here's my worst fear, worst case scenario for the Middle East. Okay, Israel will be fighting a two-front war.
Yeah.
Gaza, Hamas in the south.
Yes.
As soon as the ground incursion, which could happen any minute, begins, I would expect more rockets to be fired from the north, from Lebanon, Hezbollah. They both have something in common, that they're getting military strategy, weaponry, money support from Iran.
Yes.
That's the head of the snake. Now we have another problem. Syria has involved itself in this conflict. Another problem, the Houthis seem to be wanting to involve themselves, and you've had comments made by the leaders of Iran that they themselves may get involved in a conflict. If that happens, correct me if you think I'm wrong, I would say all bets are off in the Middle East. We could have a full-out war in the Middle East, Israel at the center of it, and at that point, if Israel's existence is put in jeopardy, I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu, who I've known for almost 30 years, I don't think there's anything he won't do to preserve and protect his country from people that have committed their lives to destroy it.
He has to do that, and around here, people throw around the phrase existential threat. They have an existential threat every day. I mean, their neighbors want to eliminate them and wipe them off the map. So Prime Minister Netanyahu is resolved. I've spent time with him personally. I know him as well. I think he's a strong leader at this important time, and I think he's going to do what is necessary. And America will back him up. I mean, they tell us when we're in Israel, and you've been there, they say the reason that we are able to sustain ourselves and survive is because everyone knows that our big ally is America. And that's an important role that we have in the world. We're not the world's policeman, but a strong America, as I said, is good for the whole world because it's the perception that we would be there to defend freedom. And that's been our role. That's the Reagan doctrine. A lot of our friends in our party are becoming more isolationist and understand the concerns. We can't be dropping money out of helicopters all around the world because we also have a $33.5 trillion federal debt of our own.
I saw a sign on the way in, it said 33.6.
Did we go to 6? Great.
Probably from this afternoon.
Exactly. It goes so
scary.
fast you can't track it. And that's the concern. You know, we deeply care and are concerned about all nations of free people around the world, but we have to take care of our own house first. And so that's also part of this delicate calculation and the decision.
I've been to Israel during a flare-up in, I believe it was 2014, and at that point I got to see up front and go inside the terror tunnels that are built by Hamas. By the way, all of the money and resources that was given to the Palestinian people for infrastructure, for schools, and hospitals.
Yeah.
But they have this massive network of terror targets.
Yes.
And when you go inside, it just is mind-numbing that this is how they're spending their time because they want to kill Israelis or take them hostage. Right. But it taught me a lot about, and being in border cities, one border city in particular, they wrote, 10,000 rockets they've been hit with in 10 years. And these kids play indoors in bunker playgrounds. My question to you is simple. Joe Biden wants to give $100 million to the Palestinians for humanitarian relief. Sounds great on paper. I have zero confidence one penny will make it to the Palestinian people because Hamas has been forcing people to stay and pointing guns and shooting at the Palestinians that want to leave.
Right. They use the Palestinians as shields. They don't even provide the people with clean drinking water. We're supposed to believe they're going to use U.S. Aid for humanitarian purposes. Count me as a skeptic, okay? We've got to be very careful about what we're doing there. You do not want to further empower the terrorist groups. Our heart goes out to the innocent Palestinian people, of course, as we do to anyone who's in a terrible situation like that. But we have to be very discerning in our policy and in our approach to this. And so that's why we're demanding, House Republicans are demanding more information from the White House so that we can help and make these critical decisions. Look, we're going to stand by Israel, but we have to be careful in how it's done.
What about the $100 million for humanitarian relief for the Palestinians?
I think it's a tough issue. I mean, we're going to have to see what that is tied to. And I'll tell you, the House Democrats, of course, are very resolute on that. And they try to portray us as being uncaring. Look, we care about that as well. But we have to be very careful that we're not further funding terrorist organizations that are trying to wipe Israel off the map.
Can you explain why then President Obama, Vice President Biden did this billion-dollar deal with Iran? Can you explain why Joe Biden made a deal with the Iranians for $6 billion to be freed up in money that was held that they had no access to?
We're in fits over that. I don't understand it at all. I don't understand most of their foreign policy, and I think it's gotten us in the shape that we're in. We have big disagreements with them. We're asking for and demanding accountability on that as well. And we have to, the White House has to improve how they're messaging this and how they're explaining it to people, because we all have to understand that we have a right to. This is the precious treasure of the American people, and if you're sending Iran money, we know that Iran is directly tied to all this. These are Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies of Iran, and they're tied in now with Russia and China. I mean, it is a new axis of evil. That's how we see it, and so it has to be addressed accordingly.
Would you say if Israel, with all the funding of terror and all these terror organizations, are they within their right to fight back and go directly at Iran?
Of course. That was the first, as you noted, the first act of my speakership is that we passed that resolution to articulate that and make it very clear where we stand. The House is back in business, and we're going to stand with Israel.
Let's ask, I call it the new axis of evil, China, Russia, Iran.
Yeah.
How big a threat?
It's huge. It's the biggest threat. Since World War II, we have been the big kid on the block, right? We're the last real superpower. And after the USSR fell, we've been unrivaled. Now, China is a near peer-to-peer adversary to us now. And of course, their goal is to rebuild the empire. And so we're doing everything we can to ensure that we maintain our military superiority. We're the only nation that has the ability to project power and force like that around the globe right now, but China is doing its best to encroach upon that power. And you see they're even putting outposts around us. They're buying up farmland in states here in the U.S. All of these things have to be addressed at the federal level, at the state level, with the legislatures, and even in some of these localities. We have Chinese CCP-owned companies that are coming in and open shop on Main Street in some towns, in our small towns.
They're buying our farmland.
Yes.
They're buying our ranch land, and they're buying land near military installations.
Yes.
Would we be allowed to buy it there?
Of course not.
Of course not.
Of course not. And they allowed a Chinese spy balloon to float unimpeded across the country for 8 days. We scratch our heads a lot around here about these Biden decisions, and I don't know, it may be tied in some way to, I don't know, some of the money they receive from some of these folks.
Well, you are on the House Judiciary Committee.
Yes.
We've been watching the House Oversight Committee with James Comer. Yeah. Let me ask you, there's issues involving two congressmen in particular, a Democrat and a Republican. George Santos, the Republican, many charges have been filed against him. And then the issue of Congresswoman Tlaib and others, and this talk of censure and talk of removal. Do you support either?
We're working through those issues. I'll tell you, I talked to the authors of some of these resolutions today that want to deal with that. Here's the reality, Sean. We have a 4-seat majority in the House. It is possible that that number may be reduced even more in the coming weeks and months, and so we'll have what may be the most razor-thin majority in the history of the Congress. We have no margin for error, and so George Santos is due process, right? He is. My understanding is I think he's appearing in a federal court tomorrow. And we have to allow due process to play itself out. That's what our system of justice is for.
He's not convicted. He's charged.
Not convicted. He's charged. And so if we're going to expel people from Congress just because they're charged with a crime, then, or accused, that's a problem.
Joe Biden has allowed over 7.5 million people into this country illegally. It'll be probably over 8 million, even people on terror watch lists, even people from countries like Iran and Syria. How do you get the border secure? And what is your assessment of Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas? Should he be impeached?
Listen, you know that my duties here have included Judiciary and the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. In my assessment, almost every federal agency under the Biden administration has been weaponized. The very agencies that were designed to protect and serve the people are now being used against them, and we have many examples of that, and you've talked about all of it on your show before. Look, Mayorkas has been an abject failure in his position. I believe he has committed impeachable offenses, and I've been on record saying that for a long, long time. In fact, he appeared in an oversight hearing in our House Judiciary Committee. We have jurisdiction over his department. Less than 4 months into office, and I saw where this was headed, and I told him in a clip that went viral, Mr. Mayorkas, you need to get your resume prepared, because I thought he was headed towards a dead end on this. Look, the investigations are going forward. Jamie Comer and the Oversight Committee are doing an exceptional job. Jim Jordan, who's the chairman of Judiciary, has helped lead on that. We've gotten a lot of information on all these issues.
Well, you're on the Judiciary Committee. Let me ask you, do you believe that Joe Biden's Department of Justice, do you believe our FBI has been politicized? Do you believe it's been weaponized? Do we have a dual justice system?
Absolutely. We have a two-tiered system of justice, and that erodes the people's faith in our system of justice itself. And this is what I reminded Merrick Garland when he was in front of us, the Attorney General, Christopher Wray at the FBI. The greatest threat here is not these individual issues. It's that the people are losing their faith in our system of justice. And Sean, you cannot maintain a constitutional republic, a government of, by, and for the people, if the people doubt that the system is fair. If they believe there's two tiers of justice, then the system doesn't work at all. And so I think Garland's been a great threat. I think he's the worst Attorney General in the history of the United States.
Joe Biden swore to the American people, both as a candidate and as president. Not one time did he ever speak to his son, his brother, or anybody for that matter about their foreign business dealings. We know that is a flat-out lie. We've learned from James Comer and his investigation that we are talking about tens of millions of dollars taken in from a lot of adversarial countries, some of our top geopolitical foes like China, Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Mexico, other countries, tens of millions. They've discovered all of these shell corporations. They've discovered 9 particular Biden family members have been paid. And then you have the issue of Joe on tape admitting that he used our money, taxpayer money, to leverage $1 billion in loan guarantees, which was Obama administration policy to fire a prosecutor investigating his son. Well, one of the benefits of that, his son continued to get paid for a job he admits he had no experience in at a time where he was dealing with a drug problem. What does that sound like to you?
That's a pretty good recitation of the facts. And as John Adams said, facts are stubborn things. They're hard to ignore. I believe the documents are proving all that. As my good brother Jamie Comer often says, the bank records don't lie. So we have the receipts on so much of this now. It's a real problem. That's the reason that we shifted into the impeachment inquiry stage on the president himself. Because if in fact all the evidence leads to where we believe it will, that's very likely impeachable offenses. That's listed as a cause for impeachment in the Constitution. Bribery and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Bribery is listed there, and it looks and smells a lot like that. And I think the evidence, we're going to follow the truth where it leads. We're going to engage in due process because, again, we're the rule of law party. I know people are getting anxious and they're getting restless and they just want somebody to be impeached, but that's not. We don't do that like the other team. We have to base it upon the evidence, and the evidence is coming together. We'll see where it leads.
Let me go back to the budget, if I may, for a second. This whole issue of regular order. We have 4 of the 12 appropriations bills that have already been dealt with. My understanding is that's about 70% of the budget. So you have 8 more to go. You've talked about a short-term CR that you would be willing to maybe have until January or maybe even to April? Would there be, we talk about a clean CR. Would you have conditions? For example, Chip Roy and Byron Donalds had a plan. Okay, well, we'll give you a CR, but it's not going to be clean. We're going to cut government spending by 8%, and we're going to secure the border and protect our military and veterans. Would you have conditions to a CR?
I think we have to, if indeed we do that. November 17th, of course, is the deadline that was extended.
Yeah, you've got about
it's coming quickly.
21 days.
And we're speeding it up as quickly as possible. That was my commitment to my colleagues when they named me Speaker of the House, and that work began today. In fact, we passed one of the approach bills just a couple of hours ago before you arrived here. We got it off the House floor, the energy and water bill. That was a big box that we had to check, and we did that. And so we're going forward. Chip and Byron are at the table with others. We're working through this with the ideas and trying to ensure that if another stopgap measure is required, that we do it with certain conditions. And I think there will be conditions the American people can live with and a consensus that we can build around here in the House.
Let me ask you this. We have 2/3 of this country now are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
Many of those people can't afford bare necessities. I know Biden's been crowing about Bidenomics. I know they got good numbers today. However, a lot of economists I spoke to earlier today, this doesn't look good at all. They think we're in a bubble that is about to burst, and it's going to be even worse, especially in the housing market. It's new home construction is stopping, sale of pre-existing homes, a disaster. How bad is this economy? How long can we sustain another, $2 trillion in debt that Joe Biden took on last year? And how do we get inflation down once and for all? I have friends of mine just 3 years ago. They were getting interest rates at a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at 30%. Right. Now it averages 8%. Nobody's going to sell their home and buy another home at that because it's thousands of dollars more for the same type of home.
It grinds the economy to a halt. It's a disaster. That's the word you use, and that's the appropriate word. These are policy choices that got us in this situation. If you remember, if you rewind in your mind back to right before the pandemic began, in the Trump administration, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world. And it wasn't by happenstance. It's because we cut taxes, cut regulations. We focused on American energy dominance. We were doing and following all the policies that led to economic success and growth for all Americans, everyone in every demographic. All boats were rising. We can achieve that again, but you have to do almost exactly the opposite of what the Biden administration is pursuing and doing. This is not rocket science, but we're so far down the road now that we have to make these changes quickly. And we're trying to urge our Democrat colleagues to take a look, again, at the basic facts. I mean, interest rates are so high now. They're going to continue to rise, apparently.
Double digit, I could see it coming. All right, let me ask maybe the question this way, because you do have such a small majority. And obviously that didn't help Kevin McCarthy. I think you should get rid of the motion to vacate and raise the bar dramatically, 20, 25 people at least. My question is specifically on the economy. If you pass your budgets in the House, you're going to send it over to the Senate. They're going to rip it up line by line. You'll go into conference. But the only way you can succeed is if you, as Speaker, are able to hold your slim majority.
Yes.
That's going to be a Herculean task. How do you plan on doing that?
With truth and transparency and relationships. This is a business that's based on that. And my colleagues trust me. I'm grateful for that. It's earned. And I'm going to do well by them, or we're going to govern well. We're going to show the American people we can. When you get into the negotiations in the conference committee, the Speaker of the House and the leader of our party has to have a strong hand. And so if we can keep the team together, keep rowing in the same direction, look, everybody's got to give up on some of their preferences. None of us are going to get everything we want. I'll never ask any of my colleagues to compromise core principles because I share those principles with them, right? But Ronald Reagan used to teach us I'd rather get 80% of what I want than go over the cliff with a flag waving. I still believe in that idea, and I'm very optimistic. I am bullish on the future of America. I am bullish on our chances to change the way Washington works, Sean. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. That's the vision I've cast to my colleagues. I believe it to my core. We're going to take this day by day, decision by decision, but keep everybody together and move the ball forward for the American people. I genuinely believe that we can get this done.
One of the things that I have said over and over again to anybody that'll listen, although I can look in this camera and say, honestly, nobody ever listens to me.
Not true, not true.
But I try. It's my strong belief that all Republicans, you're either going to win together or you're going in the eyes of the American people, you're going to win on your agenda or you're going to lose. And I don't see any way of winning if you don't all stick together. I know you have this disparate group of egos, if you will. I hope everybody will maybe hear your admonition and work together as a team and go forward, fix our border. Can we become energy dominant and maybe start paying down our debt? Can we come up with sound foreign policy to help out our allies in a time of, a dire time for them? I mean, these challenges run deep. And then you have the issue of law and order, safety, security, open borders. Pretty scary times. Do you think this country's in decline?
I think right now we're in very desperate times. I think the hour is late and the crisis is great, but here's why I'm encouraged. In previous generations of Americans, from the framers, the founders of this country, all the way through, at times the Revolutionary period, the Civil War, the Great Depression, the other world wars, when the leaders here got in trouble that was beyond the scope of what they could solve themselves, individually or collectively, you know what they did? They sought divine guidance for it. We have In God We Trust right above the rostrum there, and I pointed that out in my speech.
Is this the Ben Franklin moment?
It is a Ben Franklin moment.
Constitutional Convention?
Exactly right. It's the same thing, and we're calling one another to humble ourselves and recognize that the challenges are so great, but that's where a real opportunity is presented. I believe that God is not done with America yet, okay? I still believe in that motto. It's not just a quaint saying to me. It's what the nation was founded upon, this belief. It's what distinguishes us from all these other communist, Marxist, socialist countries around the world. It's the key to our greatness, and we ought to appeal to that. And I believe if we do, that God is going to give us his favor, and I believe we're going to solve these problems.
I did ask you before the show, and I'll make this the last question, and I said, because I believe that if you take this majority and you can somehow pull these disparate groups together, I do believe it would be good for the country, because I'm very clear about my conservatism. I believe those policies are best for our country, and I want the best for our country. This country, I've had a life, frankly, that's undeserved. And I just really, so I asked you, I said, would it be okay if it came back when you get settled? You've had less than 48 hours. We appreciate you doing the interview. And bring the disparate groups in a room and do it for an hour and see what issues that we can find full agreement on. I would like to know what those issues are and where the disagreements are. Will you be willing to have us back?
Of course, we're working on that, and that's a great admonition. Look, this place is filled with people of good faith, of deep conviction, and they understand the necessity of working together.
There's some big egos, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, well, but Washington has that sometimes. We're going to work through it. I'm optimistic.
All right, Mr. Speaker, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Godspeed. Thank you for being with us.